Have you started learning Russian or thought about embarking on a Russian learning journey with the belief that language learning is inexpensive and in the best case free? Well, sadly this isn't the case. In fact, learning a new language can be very expensive. In this video, I'm going to show you which expenses you can reduce or even omit. Before we start talking about how you can save money, let's quickly talk about how you should approach Russian learning. In my opinion, the best way to learn any language is the natural language learning approach. This means that you don't study any grammar, or at least not as much grammar. Your main focus should be on language input in the form of audiobooks, reading, language buddies, etc. If you want to learn more about a natural language learning approach, check out my video specifically on this topic, linked down in the video description. So, how can you reduce your expenses while learning Russian? Firstly, let's talk about expenses you can completely cut out because they are useless. A grammar book is one of them. You do not need a Russian grammar book to learn the Russian language. Many people make the mistake of trying to obtain a language by doing tons of grammar exercises. This approach is highly inefficient, so don't buy a grammar booklet with exercises inside of it. If you want to, you can buy a thin grammar booklet with the core grammar structures. Every time you don't understand a grammar structure, you can look it up in this booklet. On the other hand, you can also just look the grammar rule up on the internet for free. So, if you're on a tight budget, buy a smaller grammar book without any exercises inside of it. If you're on an even tighter budget, don't buy a grammar booklet at all and look things up in the internet when needed. I'll put a link for a small grammar booklet as well as a Russian grammar website inside of the video description. Next, let's look at how you can reduce your software expenses. Many people buy a pricey Russian learning app when starting with Russian. These relatively pricey apps include Rosetta Stone, Pimsleur, or Babbel. Many people don't realize that there are actually some very good free Russian learning apps out there. Let me show you some. First of all, we have Duolingo. Most people have heard of this app by now. Still, many people don't use it. It may be true that Duolingo is not as good at teaching you Russian as some of the paid apps, but Duolingo is an excellent way to get familiar with Russian. I would advise anybody who is thinking about learning Russian to download Duolingo and do the first 5 lessons. If you enjoy the sound of the language and are actually motivated to continue learning, then you may think about buying a non-free app. Another great platform to learn Russian for free is BBC Languages. Although I haven't tried it out myself, I've heard a lot of good things about it. It's supposed to have some great interactive lessons with audio, video, and reading material available. If you want to check it out, I'll put a link in the video description. Okay, so now you have a free app to get used to the language, you have a thin grammar booklet to look up core grammar rules, but there's still a couple of things missing. One of them is a website to learn vocab. And here is where Anki comes in. Anki is a simple but convenient vocab learning software. And the best thing about it, it's absolutely free, except for when you're on an iOS device. But even on those, you can, instead of downloading the app for $25, use Anki Web. I'm sure most of you have heard of Anki before, so I won't deep dive into this topic. In short, Anki uses spaced repetition to ensure that you rehearse your words at the perfect time. If you want to learn more about spaced repetition and Anki, I'll also link some videos in the video description about that topic. To really ensure that you can speak Russian, you need some form of a language buddy or native Russian teacher. For people on a budget, finding a native Russian speaking teacher is too expensive. Instead, look for a Russian-speaking individual in your family, school, or friend circle. If you can't find somebody, you'll have to make do with a friend who is also studying Russian at the moment. When speaking together, you can correct each other and at least improve your speaking fluency. A positive side effect of studying with somebody every week is a motivation boost because you actually enjoy talking to somebody and are having fun. This way, you will learn the language faster. At one point or another, however, you'll have to find a native speaker who can improve your pronunciation. One point we haven't covered so far is how to absorb literature when on a budget. To this, there is actually a very simple answer. Go to your local library and get some Russian beginner books. If you don't have a library with Russian content, or you have social anxiety and can't even set foot outside of your door, there are some great online alternatives. These include Project Gutenberg or plain old YouTube. Although Project Gutenberg doesn't have any books in the Russian language, they have a couple of English translations. These are perfect to get familiar with Russian culture. YouTube, on the other hand, has a lot of Russian channels where you can perfectly learn Russian. Now we've covered some ways to spend less money on language learning, but the only way to learn Russian is implementing it into your everyday life. Here are 3 tips to help you proceed in this goal. The first tip is to set your phone language to Russian. By immersing yourself in Russian every time you use your phone, you create a constant exposure to the language, which can significantly enhance your learning experience. Not only will you encounter Russian words and phrases in various contexts throughout your day, but you'll also become more familiar with the language's structure and vocabulary. Additionally, switching your phone to Russian can serve as a daily reminder of your language learning goals, helping to keep you motivated and engaged in the process. The second tip is to maintain a Duolingo streak. Duolingo has a built-in feature that shows you how many consecutive days you've spent learning on the app. After a certain amount of time, you won't want to break your streak and you'll automatically return to Duolingo every day. My third and final tip is to scroll through YouTube and proactively curate a collection of Russian videos by bookmarking them in advance. Take some time to explore various channels from language tutorials to vlogs and cultural documentaries and add those that interest you to your Watch Later playlist. By doing this, you'll create a personalized library of content tailored to your language learning goals and preferences. Furthermore, consider organizing your playlist based on topics or difficulty levels to ensure a structured and efficient learning experience. For example, you could have separate playlists for grammar lessons, vocabulary building, listening practice, and cultural insights. This way, you can easily navigate to specific areas of interest and track your progress over time. But how can you implement this into your everyday life? Whether you're commuting to work, exercising at the gym, or relaxing at home, seize the opportunity. You don't have to be actively engaging with the content. Just by listening to Russian, you're one step closer to fluency.